Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Goals Eye View. That's if I've counted correctly. I'm joined by Chris.
Evening all.
I'm joined by Dom.
Hello guys, you all right?
And for the first time in a while, I'm joined by Tom.
Hello, you guys all right?
Yeah, all good. So Tom, you were at Southend.
It's a bit intimidating, Tom, to be in the presence of such an unbelievable cast of minds, isn't it?
The A team.
Tom wasn't very happy when I said we've got another one because he said he struggles to get a word in enough with three of us. So unlucky, Dom.
Yeah. Well, I start a sentence, Sam finishes it. That's what usually happens. So.
That's what all good double acts do, though, isn't it?
Yeah. So basically, Tom, you were at Southend. You did fantastic Twitter coverage for TORQUAYTALK. What were your overall thoughts of the game and all that kind of thing?
Oh, it was a game that represented our season in a way. First half, we were the better team in the first half. Not spectacular by any means with what we had on the pitch, but we had one off the line. I think we had one off the bar. Great finish by Troy Johnson right on half time. And then the second half was we were rather lackluster, and even with a man advantage for half an hour, you couldn't really tell which side had 10 men on the pitch and what side had 11.
Always seems to be the way. We get worse when the other team has 10 men, don't we? I don't know what happened.
I mean, thankfully, the game, let's be honest, the game had nothing riding on it. Obviously, a lot of the players are moving on, which we'll get to in a little bit. But it's sort of just, it was our season in reverse in a way. Like, it was a good first half, and it was just a really poor second half. But to be honest, Southend were just as average as we were. So
they've had a similar season to us, really, haven't they? Started terribly, but come back well, and then sort of faded out.
But yeah, it was a fun weekend. Nice play, Southend. It was the weather on the Saturday was really good. The beers were flowing. So at least there was that for the weekend. There was a lot worse final games you could go to.
Yeah, no, that's good. And there was a decent turnout from the Yellow Army as well.
Yeah, 141, decent turnout.
Not many teams would get 140 to end the season mid-table game, would they? Like that.
Nowhere else you'd rather be, mate.
Before we
there were no 3 points, but there was a 3-match ban, which Dimitri will enjoy for the first 3 games next season. Was that tackle as bad live as it looked on the telly? It's not clever, was it?
It wasn't a clever tackle. I mean, it didn't. The only time I sort of realised that there was a possible red card coming was when the referee was reaching for his back pocket. I guess I was looking at the phone doing a tweet or something at the time, but I watched it back and it was a pretty bad challenge.
It wasn't right. No.
I mean,
so unnecessary this time of the season, isn't it? Throwing yourself like that. You could injure somebody, in a nothing game. It's just totally unnecessary at all.
But yeah, it was a definite red card. But like I said, we didn't really take advantage of it.
No.
We were
I always think this, when you get a man sent off, it's not as bad thing as everyone makes out. If you make a tactical switch, you're going to not be as good, but probably going forward, because most managers will lose an attacker or a creative player. But usually means the 10 men work a lot harder. So, and as we showed that the 11 men sort of get a bit complacent. But one thing I was going to ask you about, so Mark Holstead clearly and Ali Omar, who have been talked about a lot recently, after I re-recorded last week and I was talking about Holstead, I was just going on the commentary. I watched the highlights back, and look, he made saves, and a save's a save, but I was still a bit sort of suspect on his positioning. I felt it actually made himself harder, for himself, and he kind of looked very tentative. But I watched, I think it was Shrimpers TV, and they showed basically 8 or 9 minutes highlights, basically our equivalent to Southend. And he actually kind of, for the first time I've ever seen him talk his shirt, apart from the pool friendly, which I watched, he actually kind of looked more the part, really. He didn't look as nervous. He was a lot more relaxed, it seemed to. He was a bit more commanding. He just kind of, wasn't always nervous tension going on with his wrist. He was kind of just a bit more sort of relaxed. He looked the part. I'm not saying he's the number one next season. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that's how it came across. What was he like for you?
I think you look at the games that he's played, the Stockport game and the Southend game, and compared to what he was like at the start of the season, he's definitely improved from his confidence side aspect. He's definitely improved. And I think working with a player like Sean has actually helped him in a way, which you would think it would be the other way around, with Mark being the more experienced keeper. He had
There's also
moments.
no pressure on the end of the season either, is there?
Yeah, that's it as well.
The start season, real pressure
anymore,
wasn't there on him.
No, he made a good save. He made a good couple of saves. I mean, I've always said he was a good shot stopper. Like, he's made some really good, smart saves in the games that he has played in. But unfortunately, you go back to sort of the beginning of the season.
There's no real command.
The defense just didn't look comfortable at all, and you just had no faith that he was going to keep a clean sheet. Then obviously you had the Tunbridge game where he dropped the winner for them.
Yeah,
and but I think we know he's here for another year.
He's going to be a number 2 next season.
I think he's a more than adequate number 2 goalkeeper. I definitely wouldn't give him the number 1 based on the 2 games that he has played.
No, not at
all. To end the season, because let's be honest, if Sean hadn't got injured at Stockport, he wouldn't have played. Full stop. So but he made some good saves. He was a lot more confident than I've seen him. So I think as a number 2, I think he's a very good option to have in the team.
Yeah, and he has.
I think there's better out there.
I think very good might be a stretch, but I mean, we're not going to get people who are that much better, are we?
And we're not going to offload him.
There's somebody who's probably a good guy, and it helps the number 1 achieve what he wants,
And he's been a number 2.
But if your number 1 gets injured, you probably get somebody else in, don't you? I don't think you'd have him.
And he's been a number 2 keeper, most of his career, hasn't he? I mean, you look at the clubs he's played for. He's very rarely he's been in the first team. Very often.
I mean, interesting. If you think you said about him from crosses, whether it's just a Torquay thing because obviously you think more about it, but thinking back historically, we seem to have had a load of keepers that were dodgy, good shot stoppers that were dodgy in the air. Going back to people like Ryan Northmore, Sam wouldn't have heard of him, he'd have been too young. Ryan Northmore, Matthew Gregg, Ricey, even to a point, were good shot stoppers, but it was coming off that judging when to come on, which is where McDonald's got so much better, judging when to come, judging how deep in his box to go. And I think whether it's just a Torquay thing, whether it's just a lower league goalkeeper thing, maybe.
That decision making is probably more difficult. The shot saving's good.
For keeping it so much about
natural instinct, whereas the command in the box and decision making, that's where you really become a proper keeper.
You're right. And it's so much about chance prevention, not just saying like, it sounds stupid because you're a goalkeeper saving, but if you're coming for crosses and you're coming off your line, sweeping up attacks, and you're just taking that pressure off your defence, then that's the difference. That's what Sean McDonald does. He makes everything like economy of effort. Talking about goalkeepers before we move on to retain list, we've been hit today with the news, which is not good for the club at all, that our youth keeper has gone to Wigan, which it's bittersweet because I'll ask you what your thoughts on it. But for me, it shows that, that this whole connection with South Devon and Proto and that is working. We've got a couple of good talents there, but we've lost out on an asset, and even it's not even a professional deal, so we have no youth compensation either. Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
I guess it's not a surprise, is it? I guess it's a sort of it's a classic you reap what you sow almost, isn't it? Because the club seem to be happy to be in this agreement with Paynton South Devon College, don't they, around using the facilities. We use the 4G when the weather doesn't allow it, and we've drafted players in, and some of those lads have played in some of the the youth games and the kind of reservish games we've had. But the problem with that is when there are some good ones, you either get them on your books or this happens. And I think this is probably this isn't like looking back, Dan Lavercombe was the one we were chatting about earlier, wasn't it? I mean, Dan Lavercombe was an example of somebody who was our own, who was in our system when we had
the Apollo
reap the benefits. But
was he Apollo or something before, and then we signed him?
He was, but it was in our it was in our name though, wasn't it? Which this is effectively nothing to do with us, and we just kind of pill for the good, the best players out of it. So they're being harsh, but I've got no sympathy for the club, because if they're not going to invest the money in the academy, and I understand fully why not.
They don't want to invest, but this is a cheaper option, isn't it? This time they don't want to go through the full academy route and have to pay. I remember. I mean, it's to make money to spend money to make money if you do it properly.
We do.
The city have done.
But this is a thing.
We're stuck in a sort of middle ground there, aren't we? That's the trouble.
I remember somebody saying to me several years ago when Crawley closed their academy that somebody who worked at the club knew somebody who worked at the club, and they said they reckon it was £125,000 a year to run an academy. So unless you're producing players who are either A, getting turnover into your football club by performances playing, or you're doing what Exeter do, which is, bring players in, they play in the first team, and then they become saleable assets. Unless you're doing that, you're just throwing money out the door. And we've never done that, have we? Apart from Terry Venables' brown envelopes for Matt Gregg and the odd 20, 30,000 here or there, we've never really produced players on a regular basis.
Initial stump up, isn't it? Because you're thinking you'll get a couple of youngsters sold, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy might have got 50 grand
we
from Wigan. That would have only paid a little amount, but it would have started to pay it back, wouldn't it, if these youngsters come through and we get money for them?
Because we
it's a waiting game, isn't it, like that?
Yeah, it's such a shame because it could have helped with the goalkeeper situation. And it's an interesting one from his point of view because we talk about Lavicum, but Lavicum was already a professional footballer. He was our number one.
Absolutely.
At the time.
And
that Wigan move for me, I mean, I don't know much about him, but he feel like it maybe stalled his career. I feel like if he'd stayed at Torquay and been the number one the next season, maybe he would have just grown a bit better that way. And that Neil Osborne we sold very young, 50,000 Southampton. And then he didn't break through there.
I don't know if you remember Matthew Gregg getting sold, Chris. That shows how transfer fees haven't come around for us. Was it 300 grand we sold him for Crystal Palace?
It was a lot. It was a lot considering how good he was, i.e. not that good.
Yeah.
He had promised him to be a young keeper. But I mean, considering what is he our second biggest sale after Rodney Jack? I think that's true.
Oh yeah, something like that. That's close.
Incredible, really, when you consider, because he hadn't played that many games either, I don't think.
Bobby allegedly fetched a fair bit, didn't he, as well?
I think it's undisclosed. It was like 200, 300, or So, but anyway, moving on to the release. So I asked you, Thomas, first. Where should we start? We'll go with the 8 release ones first. So we've got Lolos, Louis Slough, Scott Piper, Chory Johnson, Joe Phillips, Dan Holman, Marcin, Jake Andrews. What are your thoughts overall about those players that have left?
I'm not surprised, to be honest. I think that's probably what most fans would have guessed at the end of the season. I maybe would have kept Trory on for
I think a lot of Torquay fans
another season. I think out of the 8 there, I think that's the one that maybe you think there is potential in him. Although the post-match interview from Gary Johnson, he wasn't very...
Finished him off early, didn't it, that?
It was sad, really, I thought, because he sort of kind of gives it his all and he gets to the end of the season kind of dismissed like a bee who's been buzzing around for a while.
It's fine if we've got better players lined up, is what I'm saying. I prefer Gary Johnson to be angry and that. But we should move on to a minute and be brutal and all kind of that. A lot of people, and I, to be honest, agree with them, argue that this, who we've offered contracts to, isn't as brutal as we're expecting. But I think there's more to it.
I would say to that on that, Sam, as well. There's 2 things I'd say about the retained list. I totally agree with what Tom just said there. There was no one in there that I disagreed with, nor was a surprise. Usually there's one who you go, oh, blimey, but Chory will still come in. Yeah. The only comment I would make on Chory Johnson is, do players like him get you promoted?
No.
And there's squad players and there's players who fill holes and do things here and there. But the reality is, do players of that ability and that level get you promoted?
I think it's more a reflection of a guy who's given it their all, I suppose.
I think there's one person there who's a bit of a victim of circumstance, which is Marcin Brzezinski, our young Polish keeper. Because if Halstead wasn't around, I reckon he could have probably been taken as a number 2 next season. If that makes sense. If Halstead was on a 1 year, it probably would have gone, you're the number 2 next year, and he may have got more time.
Yeah. I think it's a shame to him.
And the youth keeper trying to integrate the youth keeper is now left anyway.
Yeah, he played against Woking the season before. I thought he looked
really
good.
Actually,
so it's a bit of a shame he hasn't been season to see if he can come through.
But that's probably one of the situations again, because logic says, at the beginning of the season, before McDonald came back in, when everyone was clamouring for Halstead to come out, I would think, well, we'll just, if you signed him, play him. If Halstead's that bad, and he got to the stage where you had to take him out of the squad, and then even though Halstead was,
he's a young keeper as well.
But he got nowhere near the squad. He got nowhere near the squad at any point. So.
He came on. Did he play? He played this season.
He played 45 minutes.
I think he did.
Yeah,
he
did half time and
came on a Solihull, didn't he?
Yeah.
I agree. I'm in full agreement with you, Sam, on that one. I think if Halstead wasn't on a 2-year deal, I think he definitely
might have been there's number 2. So
cheap option, and from what we've seen, which is not an awful lot, but
it's a shame to see the 2 youth guys go Slough and Piper without even playing, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a shame.
We're always hoping these guys will make a breakthrough, but it never seemed to be likely, did it, those 2?
My only issue with that is I don't see what the club thinks these people are going to be doing. Because they've not played. Yes, they've been around the first team, and Gary will know whether or not these people are good enough to be playing in the to make the grade. But this happens time and again. We give these people professional contracts, they don't play, and then they're released. So it's kind of like, well, what's the point? What's the purpose of them?
Rolling on for years, that sort of thing. Unfortunately,
it's not like they've played, because Moyes they clearly see something in. Because obviously he's made a bit of a appearance around the first team towards the end of the season, and he's been offered another deal. So they clearly see more in him. But what's the point in giving people the like Slough and
how old is Slough now? Is he like in his early 20s?
Yeah, it's just
21. I suppose
it's I don't know what the club expects.
It's a very cheap option for a year, Chris, isn't it? On a very small.
Yeah, but you've got to have a longer term plan to it. These lads, you have to have them in your squad because you think they're going to be good enough.
Yeah, we just haven't got that. We just haven't got that plan at the moment. Unfortunately, we're a season-to-season club, and we're just hoping for the best.
That's the problem.
That's the unfortunate truth at the minute.
And
it's the same with Cosella. Why on earth, accepting that Gary's made that comment around he'll be here whilst I'm here, and I get all of that, but why on earth, on the facts, would you offer him another contract? It's just bizarre.
Is that just a stubborn refusal to get back on his words?
I think it could well be. Absolutely, but that's the only one of the players. I know we're going to move on to Sam. The players who've been offered contracts. That's the one I just don't get. He's nowhere near the first team. Yeah, seamlessly moves on. Yeah. He's nowhere near the first team. He's never plays. He doesn't come on and you think, oh, crikey, he looks like he might. He has flashes here and there. But he's barely played. He's offered him another contract.
You're moving on in the list, Chris. We haven't got to that list.
You know that chance against Southend?
It's linked.
He had that chance against Southend, didn't he? And he did brilliantly to get past one. I don't know what your view was, Tom, but I feel like he should have squared it or scored it. Because if Lolos has done that, we're all going, oh, he's not clinical, he's there, he's done that. He will never make it because he's one of our own. We might be a bit less harsh.
I think you've got to go for it in his position.
No,
he's done really well to, he skinned the defender, he's cut inside. I mean, instead of, going
he's only played 20-25 minutes this season. That's the first and only shot he's going to get. I think you take it.
It was a big surprise to me that he didn't come on earlier.
Or start.
You've got 10. You're playing against 10 men for half an hour.
Yeah, give him half an hour. I agree with
half an hour. Don't give him 15 minutes. Give him a good half hour. See what he can do. I mean, I personally thought he was all right against.
He holds his own.
He didn't look out. He didn't look out of place.
He doesn't look out of place at all. I agree with that.
I just don't see the point of playing somebody like Danny Wright in the last game because we know what he's about. Does it make any difference? I'd have just chucked him in from the start.
I'm with Chris. If you're not going to play him next season, if he just goes out on loan to Southern Premier or the South, and then he might be brought last 5 minutes, what was the point in paying him? Just let him go and start his career elsewhere.
Yeah, I also don't think he's not of an age where you would say, well, he's coming on and now he can do this. He's beyond that. Yeah, he's far beyond that.
Yeah,
this is bordering on a more ridiculous situation we ended up in with Ashley Yeoman.
Yeah,
where we had a good last 5 games of the season every year, so we gave him another contract.
Yeah, and then it happened again the next 7 years.
And it just rolls on. I mean, he's either going to be involved or he's not.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Yeah. It'll be a big season for him. It'll be a big season for him next year. You feel like
what list are we on next, Sam?
So we're on who we've offered contracts. So we've covered Olaf. I think that's well.
Please get some decorum together. Good grief.
And then so Ali, I'm reading it. Ali Omar, Dean Moxie, Asa Hall. Ali, I think we were all expecting afterwards. I think he's got a lot of positional sense to work on, but he's coming on nicely. Dean Moxie again. We're calling I don't want to call them the veterans, but D Moxie, Atal, Danny Wright. We don't know what the terms are, if that makes sense.
Do we think he's offering to all three, not expecting them all to accept?
D Moxie, I reckon, will be first team because he's still his first team standard in centre back. Asa Hall, we don't know whether you're going to be my first choice centre mid, first choice centre back, or backup centre back or centre mid next year.
Not first choice centre back.
I don't know. So we don't know the terms. I am a bit. When I was ready for a brutal sort of release, I wasn't expecting all these players to be offered contracts. I'm not going to lie.
Almost like Gary's thought, we need some continuity this time.
Or he just wants to look like he's offering these contracts, so he can. When they turn around and they go, "No, well, I tried," so no one can turn around back to the next season and go, "Well, how comes you release this?" We don't know if there's stuff like that going on.
I also suspect there's a little bit of tactics in this as well, because obviously I know absolutely no facts at all, but I suspect there's also a part of this where he knows that what I would call the big five, Little, Lemonheigh Evans, Lewis, McDonald, Winter, he must know who's going to be staying and who isn't.
Yeah.
So if say for argument's sake, God forbid it happens, but say all 5 of those go, and you've let Hall, Moxey, Wright, or people of that to go, you're basically building an entire structure again.
Yeah,
whereas at least if 3 or 4 or 5 of those go, but you've got that continuity that Dom says there about players who know the league and players who know the club.
You've also got players of experience. You've got players of experience who can hold that dressing room together a little bit, haven't you? If you keep 2 of those, so
I agree.
The thing that's interesting, it will be interesting. Obviously, we won't know, but you mentioned there as well, Sam, is about the terms. Because I've said all along, Righty, I personally would have given another deal to, but not as the main man. We've got to have more options who can play week in, week out. I mean, he admitted it himself on Twitter, didn't he? But I mean, he looked done by the end of the season.
Oh, he was absolutely
But equally,
knackered,
I suspect you wouldn't offer him the terms that he was offered last summer and when he joined.
Yeah, exactly.
To be the backup man.
Yeah.
So will he stay? If it is less money, would he stay for another year?
They could have like halved his wage, so it looks like we're making it, and he'll just go, you know what, I can probably get that at Gloucester or whatever. You know, you're not going to pay him like.
Is he?
No, exactly.
You only have to play 45 minutes of every game.
Yeah, we only plays half the season anyway, so.
I don't think we treat him very well, to be honest, because when we do play him, we batter him, don't we? We play him the whole 90 minutes. You know, he doesn't get 60 minutes and then take it off. You know, we seem to just.
What are your thoughts, Tom, on this? The Danny Wright one is the one that I think has caused the most debate without our fan base. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Oh, I'm 50-50 like on Danny Wright.
Don't sit on the fence here, please, Tom. Had enough of that from Sam.
The problem with Danny Wright that I've got is Danny Wright a few years ago. I mean, we saw in our playoff season last year just how big of an asset Danny Wright was and how much we missed him in the second half of the season. And he holds the ball well, but I just think I think it's time to
move on,
look elsewhere, and maybe move him on.
I think maybe part-time might be the thing for him.
I think maybe a stint in the National League South would be better suited for Danny. I mean, obviously, I think he's done really well for us in the time he's been here. But I think out of Wright, Moxey, Hall, I mean, the one that out of that group I would want to keep more than anyone else is Dean.
Yeah,
I think he is a class player. He gives you that experience, and when you've got players like Omar in the squad who's still developing. I mean, we've seen this season, haven't we, how Omar has developed as a player.
Yeah.
And playing alongside the likes of Moxey and Asa in the defence, it's definitely improved him. And I think
Dean, he can play left back and centre back, Dean, can't he? So he offers you options, whereas Danny Wright's a striker. There's no other, he doesn't.
I suspect Wright's probably the least likely of the 3 to stay, because Moxey is all just based on geography. Because Moxey is obviously down here, played for Exeter, children down here, wife owns business down here, all that kind of stuff. So that he's probably going to just, he'll get as much out of his body as he can. Asa, I think, moved down here, so that's probably likely. Whereas Wrighty's never moved down here, has he? Yeah, Wrighty's never.
I give Asa another year. I think another year would be what I would want to offer. But I think Danny, great servant, scored some very important goals.
For him,
it'd be nice to shake hands while you've still got good memories as well. You go on for another season, you become a bit of a squad player, a bit of a just an injury prone.
I don't see him going anywhere though. I think now he's been offered. I think Wright will sign. I don't see it unless there's a geography thing to it.
With Lee Mansell,
unless there's a geography thing to it, and he's had enough of the travelling and whatever else. But I suspect, I get the impression with him that there's a steeliness about last season that hasn't left him.
Yeah, and a stubborn refusal to give in. You never know.
I think he feels that it's almost an unfinished job. The other thing I would say about what you said, Tom, about Wright being the only option, the problem we've had is when he was injured last season and this season have been the alternatives and the recruitment around that. Last year we had no one else. We had Kim Pioka and all that rubbish. This year we've had Holman and Lawless. There has been no choice to say, do you know what, Danny, sit on the bench today. We'll play somebody else. There's no one else, and that falls down to the.
We have to have we have to have a whole new strike force, even if Danny Wright's staying. Everyone around it must be new. Whether that full strike.
I mean, Danny Wright will talk to his family as well and see what his wife thinks, and decide on his, what's best.
This is not.
Let us know what you're going to do when you watch this, Danny. Tell us what you're going to do. We're theorising here.
We won't make internet rumours.
Love you, Danny. Love you.
We won't be in the know. But I'm
glad to see Alex Moyes has got a new contract offer. He's a promising player.
Tom Lapsey, Dan Martin's well, he's before this, but we know we spoke about Dan Martin lots of time. Very good asset for the club, I believe. Very happy to see him in next season. Tom Lapsey, everyone thought
he was counted on him being on a 2-year deal.
Yeah, everyone thought
that was a shock, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a shock. I mean,
he's the only player we've bought in recent times who is pretty much at his peak. Football League proven player. I mean,
it's the injuries that hold him back from being a Football League player still.
I know he's had some injuries, but I'm amazed he's not on a 2-year.
Well, the reason we said that he's on a 2-year, I think it's down to the fact Football Manager says Halstead and Lapsey are the only ones on 2 years. So
the other thing as well is it was a hell of a punt by him, wasn't it? I get you've got to have a job, I get that, but when he'd been released by Colchester, but it's a hell of a jump to make on a 1-year deal because you thought, well, 2 years, it's a good move. It should
maybe after his injury problems. Maybe after his injury problems, teams were a bit wary and didn't want to.
The only suggestion,
he's got to stay fit, hasn't he? He's got to stay fit.
The only suggestions is that he is on a 2-year, but he just wants increased terms. So statistically, the website's still correct because
I don't know why you would do that. A club like us are not going to do that. He's not been that good. You give him more money to stay.
No, but he might want to leave or whatever. So, but
hopefully he'll stay. I think he'll stay. He loves it down here.
Yeah, I think realistically he's good enough to play League Two, but he doesn't play 46 games in the season.
Of course, absolutely.
What did he play? 30 games in total.
Yeah.
It's just.
So we're
no nonsense. He's no nonsense. That he tucks his shirt in, does his job really well.
Into everything, Tom.
Black boots.
Yeah, I love it. So Ben Winter, Sean McDonald, Joe Lewis, Little, and Nivens. If we keep any of them, I'll be delighted. But if the end of those,
there's no way they're all staying.
There's no way many of them.
It's almost like a horrible breakup. You just want to, know, don't you? Just tell me.
The Joe Lewis youth compensation might be the only thing that goes in our favour. Really, whether I don't know how it works. If he just goes no, does that mean we get no youth compensation? Or if he goes, yeah, I'll stay, but I'm not signing a new deal, that means we get it. I'm not too sure how that works, to be honest.
He's definitely worthy of a League Two club, Joe Lewis.
Yeah, and if it's 30, 40, 50, 60 youth compensation for a League Two, League One club, that's a steal, in my opinion.
My view on all of this, I have two views on it. If all 5 of those leave us and go to play in the Football League, good luck to them.
Yeah, I agree.
We should have offered Joe Lewis a longer contract when he first came because he did.
We've only ever done that in the South, haven't we? When Johnson was in January.
Yeah,
should have signed up for longer.
And the other view, I always try and stay unemotional about this. It's not easy as a football fan, but actually, and it's always the case with these is wait to see what the replacement is. Come the 30th of July, what does that team look like? Yes, all 5 may have gone. Who's replaced them?
And no one's irreplaceable at this level, even though some of them borderline it. Just what they bring.
Apart from Alex Russell.
Yeah,
he was.
Yeah, apart from McDonald might be just what he brings to the defence.
There's a lot of players we haven't been able to replace over the years, Sam. But we can do it this year. We have time. I mean, I do feel Gary can get it out, but it's just trying to improve on that bad. If you find someone bad the season that happened last year, it could happen again if we've got.
If you find someone who does 75% of what Little's done last season, again, you've got one hell of a player. So I'm not saying that like what Little's season is pretty much irreplaceable this year from centre mid. 14 goals?
We don't necessarily need 15 goals out of midfielder, do we? If we get the right striker,
if you've got a right striker, you're right.
The squad juggles round, doesn't it?
The other thing is, and I know I've said this previously, but let's not go too giddy on McDonald. He's a competent, good National League goalkeeper. Right, This time last year, no one was bothered when he left.
Yeah.
So he's had a good year this year, of course he has. But equally, were he to go, I think he would be perhaps the goalkeeping position is one of the most important that you perhaps need to throw more finance at times. But he's not irreplaceable, I would say, McDonald.
Yeah.
And his stature will be dependent on the replacement, won't it? It will look at God if the next guy's awful, won't it?
Yeah.
It's just.
And there's always Halstead if he can't get anyone else. So.
I'd be disappointed if Ben go. I always hoped that Ben Winter would be staying for 10 years. Having his testimony.
Because we kept calling him 7 out of 10 every game. He wanted 8 out of 10. We just did an 8 out of 10 right back.
We tried to push him up the power rankings, but
Yeah, I know.
I think his time has come.
I think that would be the one that would hurt the most from a fan perspective.
What's he been here 4 years now?
4 years, started every game, played every game this season. You just can't hate Ben Winter. He does his job so well. I think that's the one. Maybe McDonald as well to an extent, but I agree with what Chris said about the goalkeeper. I think you could find better goalkeepers out there.
The thing in our favour of goalkeepers is there's only so many goalkeeper slots, and so there would hopefully be a few knocking about.
I got the feeling with Connor the last few games as well is I think he was just trying to avoid getting injured.
He's gone.
I think
he could play. In my opinion, he's got so much talent, but he could probably play like he did against Notts County a lot more often with a bit more. I'm not going to say motivation.
Don't mention that club. Please don't mention that club, Sam.
I know, and if hopefully the Stockport and the Walsall rumours are true, so don't have to see him.
He played really well against Stockport last season, didn't he? I think so. That's in the fans' heads. So maybe
he's a great player.
Again, but again, if Connor goes to Stockport, good luck to him.
Good luck to him.
We can cope with that, can't we? I think just about.
I mean, there's talk is Gillingham looking at Wince, isn't it? Again, that's a good move for him.
They've
from
come,
London.
They've come down.
They're going to be competitive in League 2, aren't they?
Yeah, they need a complete rebuild.
His family from up near Kent way.
Well, he's a Palace youngster, isn't he? Palace youngster.
Yeah, we signed him from Bromley, didn't we? So it's all linked.
He's a man with a family. His brother's got released.
His brother's got released.
Yeah, we'll have his brother instead.
We have his brother instead. Yeah, he's a centre back / right back. So
why not?
And then so we move to the three under contract. Halstead, Gabby Rogers, and Keelan O'Connell. Chris, have you got anything to add?
Wonderful.
Reading that article on when was it? Yesterday.
Tuesday,
That was one of the saddest paragraphs I have read in recent years. We have got these, and these are the three we have left. Oh, who is it? It's Halstead, O'Connell, and Rogers. Oh, for fuck's sake! I just can't believe it. I mean, I am sticking up for Keelan because he's a good lad.
He's a trier.
He's a trier, as I keep saying. But I couldn't believe it.
I've got 5 minutes left for Zoom kicks out, but I was working with a Torquay colleague and I showed it to him, and we just couldn't get over the fact that in the defence, Rogers apparently was wanted by Wycombe. And apparently there's a lot of interest around and all that. So I guess
I wonder who spread that rumour. Was it one of his family members?
Probably, yes. And then or an agent.
I bet they did.
So a player that was apparently sacked by Yeovil, of course, was wanted by a just relegated championship team, whatever. But apparently that was going around at the time. So maybe they went like, you stay if we give you a 2-year deal.
It was a panic. It was a mild panic. We'll give you a 2-year deal because somebody else might.
And talking about mild panics, and then we've got O'Connell. This lad hasn't really played football at a professional level. He's played in Scotland on loan a bit. So a 2-year deal is a little bit crazy to me.
It's not crazy. Just 1 year with an option.
Not just 1 year with an option.
Again, he probably asked for it and they said, well, we need numbers. We need to get players in. Right, give it to him. It was just a panic. It was 6 weeks of panic.
You look a bit like Whitfield. Yeah, that's fine. 2 years.
Yeah, but if you look at it on the face of it, coming out of academy like Bournemouth, we've had players from there before. Yeah. So on the face of it, it was a logical signing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it made sense.
But 2 years.
2 years, you give them. With these, we never give these players 2 years. You give them a year. Are they good enough for professional football for a kick-off? And if they are, you might lose them. But then again, you might not. So
I think the only thing I'd say about O'Connell is he is kept around the squad and he has been on the sub and all that. Whereas Rogers has just been completely written off by Gary after playing 5 games.
And again, is either of those people better than they were at the start of the season?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is to say though, there is a transfer list, there is a loan list, and Gary Rogers at Plymouth Parkway was in last year, so you can see him just going off there. Remember when we come down from League 2, Hargreaves, who's well done on your Yeovil appointment. He transferred 6 players, including Aaron Downs, who played the whole season anyway. So probably one of the best players there. So I don't know.
It just goes to show how big of a rebuild we've got this season, especially if we want to be pushing for promotion next season. It's going to be a tough ask already. I mean, you take away last season, with the playoff final and then the limited run into the start of the season, it's it's just it's going to be a massive task, I think, next season.
It's sorted out, doesn't it? We've got to get people on contracts. We've got to start working out so we've got consistency each year. So we're not like needing 15 new players signed up. It's got to come to the point where we can.
It's interesting it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, there were the tones that a couple of things Johnson said, both in written press and literally, about he's just had enough of some of this group, hasn't he?
I'm determined to get a group of players that supporters can watch.
The fans can be proud of. Well, I mean, that's a very telling comment. Interesting again, and of course, internet rumours are all rubbish, generally speaking. But the players we're being linked with, we're actually being linked with players who go have them. This Lewis Kinsella from Aldershot, club captain. You'd have him. Mark Ellis is being mentioned again, who's without a club again. Sam Sherrington released by Bournemouth. These are all names that you go, mind that.
Yeah. I get the feeling he'll be looking for strong characters, people who can roll their sleeves.
He's going to build a promotion.
It's Tuesday night away at Boreham. Yeah, we're up for that. We can have a go here. Whereas the people we had are too shy, weren't they? Too meek and mild for us.
Before Zoom kicks us out with the 1 minute we've got left, and what I would say is, I know a lot of the Yellow Army was underwhelmed, I think it's fair to say, about this release list, and I think it's going to be a quite difficult few goodbyes in the next few weeks, but I wouldn't panic yet. Like, if it's the start of the season, we haven't signed anyone in, we're looking at, oh Christ, that's when I panic. But let's just give time to realise what these contracts are, if any of these players will stay, and what he has lined up. You know, I'm not saying everything's going to be all
we don't need to rush, do we?
Don't need to worry yet.
We have a manager we all trust. We'll be ready. Exactly. If this was a manager, you think, oh crikey, you wouldn't trust him with a bag of Maltesers, but I trust him. We'll be ready. I have no doubt about that.
I have no doubt.
I'd rather we take a little bit of time as well and get the right players. We don't need to rush and get in straight away. Just take a bit of time and make sure they're the right characters.
We won't really know anything until the end of July, start of June. That's when the contract's end.
That's true. So
we won't be a soft touch next season, that's for sure.
No. But thanks for joining me.
In like that.
Before Zoom ends as abruptly, and maybe we can work out how we get the proper Zoom next season, so we don't have to worry about this.
Get in the budget, Tom.
Get in the budget, Tom.
What up, Mark?